This is bonus content for Broken Burt.
Bonus Broken Burt.
Yeah.
Bonus. Burt.
It's a broken.
Brokenus. Brokenus maximus
Yes.
would be the Latin.
Broken
Yes.
burst.
Bonus Burticus brokenus. Okay, we're here talking to Mike Fuller, Taylor Edwards, and George Birch Wertz, and I'm Kari Aguila. We're all here we want to talk a little bit about Broken Burt, which is a very different episode than anything that we've done before this. This was much darker, and it really gets into Burt's backstory a little bit. So, Mike Fuller, before we get started on that, you kind of were the brains behind the whole beginning of Broken Alaska, starting this up as a show. And I know you and I have talked a little bit about how we started up the show for Space 101, but can you just tell people kind of the process of how we got this thing up and running and maybe what your background is and why you're so good at this?
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, our friend Kayla Verne Jazz, who's appeared in the show several times, she was Dolores and Tosh and directed some of the early episodes. She does an improv class on Monday nights. And so she was doing a class in scene work, like developing a scene from scratch. And so, she'd often say, okay, where are we? And so somebody said, we're a town in Alaska. And I think I was actually the one who said, it's called Broken.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So we did a scene, and I don't remember exactly how it started, but I remember the moment that I created the Burt character, because you let physicality inform your choice. So I think for Burt, I did a limp. And he was kind of hunched over. And so out of that just came the voice of Burt. Burt was originally much deeper.
Yeah, that hurts, doesn't it? That hurts your throat.
In fact, I used the excuse of Burt stopped smoking to change the voice, but it was really ripping up my throat. So I had to change the way that I did it. And so that was how kind of Burt came about. And we just did this scene, and everybody was like, oh my God, that was fun. That was so fun.
Yeah, it was like 20 minutes at the end of a show, or at the end of a class one day that we just came up with this. And it was so fun that a couple weeks later we had like 15 minutes at the end of the class. And I remember we were all like, can we go back to Broken Alaska?
Yeah, let's do Broken Alaska again. And Kay said, sure, so let's do it. So, time passed. I was working at Space 101.1, kind of helping them get their programming together. And one of the things people really wanted was an original radio drama series. And I thought, let's do Broken. It'll be easy because we can just improvise the dialogue. We won't need to write it.
Can you say easy one more time? Because that's just how you
wonderful.
Proposed it to us. This is going to be easy.
It's easy. We'll just go in and improvise it, add a few sound effects, cut a couple. So easy. We didn't know it was going to be like 30 hours of post-production for every episode. It would have been much quicker to just write it.
Yeah.
That is kind of the genesis of Broken Alaska. And all the characters, like I think Rose was Rose from the very
first time we did
get-go.
Yeah.
And I don't remember.
The first scene we did was at the produce stand. And I ran the produce stand, and I said my name was Rose. And people were just coming to the produce stand to visit, all the people from the town. And those were the characters. Like,
that's how
that's
how that came about.
I just remembered another thing about that very first time in that class. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that in that one, Burt had a crush on Rose.
Yes.
And Brett Brickman kept hitting on Rose through that whole first scene in that class. Mm-hmm. And she knew that Burt was the kinder, better man and would be loving and generous and kind and gentle. And at the very end of that scene, I remember this so clearly, she went with Brett Brickman.
Yes.
And I remember you, as Burt, you looked back with this face of utter dejection. You were completely rejected. And I remember thinking, oh God, Rose should be with Burt. And that was before we ever started the show. That was that very first time. I remember that so clearly now.
Well, and Burt had drawn a caricature of Rose that he gave her
that
he drew from memory.
Oh, my gosh.
And someone pointed out, if he drew it from memory, he's been watching you.
He's been thinking about her all the time.
He's been thinking about you.
That's funny, because now in Broken in the show, Rose and Burt are really dear friends.
Yeah.
Who clearly love each other a lot, but there isn't a romance there, even though people often think there is.
That's really
a
cool story.
About that until just now.
A lot of it was
2.5
just full blown from the
it
beginning.
Wasn't there.
From the beginning, it was there,
really...
And, it's interesting because Burt kind of felt an attraction to Rose over the years, but we've kind of played it off as because Rose reminds him of his dead wife, Sally.
Yeah.
Neat.
It was so interesting for me to see Burt as this young, brand new at this job of his, and he's all hope and all like determination, and he's so alive and he's so happy, and he just got married a couple months ago.
He'd
and
just been promoted to detective
just been
sergeant.
promoted, and it's to contrast that with Burt now in Broken, as we always sort of think of him as this broken person, with the gammy leg, and he's
Without
this
hope.
kind of like kindly man who helps everybody out, but
Living in a shack on the outskirts of town.
yeah, but back in London, this was like his heyday.
Yeah.
This was when he was in his prime.
But it's interesting, too, because, of course, they live in Brokeston Court.
right.
Yes.
Well, what we tried to do
That's
is,
right.
I was like, okay, we want everybody to still be in this one. So wouldn't it be kind of funny if, because the more things change, the more they stay the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be in a place just like Broken, but in the middle of London in 1973. So, and I think somebody's like Brokeston Court. That sounds
Yeah.
British. Okay,
Yeah.
we're Brokeston Court. And Annika, your name instead of Annika will be, and you're like, Annabelle? I was
Yeah.
like, okay, so you're
Yeah.
Annabelle, and you probably have a crush on the guy who owns the
Right.
pub down
Who's
the
David?
street. David,
Of course,
right?
yes.
Not Mark. And,
Right.
and so everybody's like this weird,
Mirror.
a mirror sort of
Yeah.
of their
Yeah.
broken character back in this setting. And even Brett Brickman is Travis Transom, the businessman know-it-all,
And if possible, he's even more annoying as Travis than he is as Brick.
because he has a
Yeah,
slightly British
right,
accent.
Yeah.
right.
Which, by the way, we must apologize for our British accents because
Oh, yes.
we're all
absolutely.
really-
Well,
yeah,
some
that
of
was
us.
some of us are better than others. I'm sorry. But this is a really deep episode to see Burt and Sally, and they have hopes and dreams, and they're thinking of moving to California.
They've been married for 2 months.
Yeah, so young.
They have their whole lives ahead of them. They're even thinking about starting a family. This is a super sad episode.
It is. It is. It really sets up Burt for a fall, like a big fall.
Yeah.
We've talked before about how kind of Brett Brickman is sort of our star of the show in so many ways because he's
Yeah.
such a complicated
Yes, he
character.
is.
But this one, gave Burt his due. He's definitely one of the main characters, the glue who holds the show together.
Absolutely.
And the town really revolves around Burt just as much as it does around Brett Brickman.
Well, in fact, if you remember, Carrie, in the first time that we improvised this in Kay's class, we kind of established that Burt is the guardian angel looking after the people of Broken. And in fact, the first scene ended with Burt praying that God would watch over the townsfolk.
Oh, I don't remember
Oh,
that. No, I
wow.
don't remember
Yeah,
that. That's
yeah.
heavy.
And
yeah.
that's when we realized in class that
Yeah.
Burt was sort of this guardian angel kind of character. I mean, not a real angel, but that he
Right.
looked after people.
Like
And
Michael Landon.
Yeah.
He was a
Yeah,
real
there we
angel.
go.
It was a different show.
well, and in fact, his wife says in that in the Broken Burt episode, I know you like to sit in the window and watch over the neighborhood.
Yeah, he has like a perch above everyone
Yeah.
watching over the
Yeah.
neighborhood
Yeah.
at the end of his long day as a police officer trying to help protect everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah. Now, the story is a convoluted one about the dagger, though.
it is.
Because
Yeah.
at one point, when you were first telling Father Francis several episodes ago, that's what it was. You were talking to Father Francis about Quanukamas time, how you're worried about the dagger because you were responsible for his release.
Right.
Like you helped to get him
Right.
arrested and put in jail, but then you realized your partner had planted evidence, and you felt as a good, honest human being that you had to tell the judge about this.
Right.
And you telling about the planted evidence is what got the dagger released and allowed him to continue his horrible crime spree.
Right.
Like you feel personally responsible for all the people that are being killed now because you could have had him in jail all this time if you hadn't been honorable, if you hadn't been honest. And that's
Yeah.
a big burden.
This was
really tough.
a
Yeah.
hard episode to record because it really touched something inside of me where I really was able to put myself in Burt's shoes.
Yeah, it was an emotionally charged scene when he falls asleep at the windowsill. He's going to deal with that guilt for the rest of his life too.
Yeah.
He says to her, "I'll go with you to help you put away the flowers." She goes, "No, sit down. You've had such a long day. Just sit. Don't come." Like he'll always think, "Why didn't I go with her?"
Yeah.
Or why did I fall asleep? I was right in the windowsill. I could have seen this. I could have
Yeah.
stopped it. Like, he's going to be racked with guilt for his whole life from this.
And
Yeah.
also replaying the scene
Over
over and
and over.
over
Yeah.
about if he had been awake.
yeah,
And then he sees Rose, who reminds him a lot of Sally.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's in the final scene of this one. It flashes up again to we're in Broken, and the birds are chirping, and it's a sunny day, and Bert's having coffee with Rose, and she's like, "What do you think of these yellow tulips? I think I'm going to start
Yeah.
selling flowers at the veggie stand now."
Yeah.
Knife in heart, twist,
Yeah.
counterclockwise.
That
That's
was listening to
brutal.
that. I listened to the episode again yesterday, and it was so hard. That
Yeah.
part where we quietly transition back to the present, and and it just, and he's like, nothing. It's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's nothing.
Oh, hurts me just to think about it.
Yeah.
That was a tough one. It was really, because we on the show have become really close. We're like family because
Yeah,
we're
we
here
are.
together. And sometimes it's kind of funny because when we send emails to each other, we do it in character, don't we, George? I know, like, you send me stuff sometimes about random stories you hear about Alaska and like.
Yeah, it makes it fun. This whole Broken theme that we're doing makes me want to know more about Alaska and the crazy stories that really come out of Alaska.
Yeah, definitely.
I've been told that a lot of people think it's like another Northern Exposure in a sense because there was some crazy stuff that happened in that too.
I never actually saw, I've heard that from several people. I've never actually seen
I haven't
Northern
either.
Exposure, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Well, you can get them at the library.
at the Broken Library?
That's wonderful.
At
Can
the
you
Broken
start it?
Library, yes, they are.
Well,
I think
Impressive.
I mean, I think to me it reminds me a little bit of the Andy Griffith Show. In the
okay.
sense that, it's a very small town and there's these kind of crazy people and they kind of drive each other nuts sometimes, but they really do need each other to survive.
And I've always thought of it sort of like The Simpsons, where you have all these different people and they have different highlight episodes, and and it's all a family. And again, there's crazy people, and you just accept them as part of your community.
And we put a lot of mystical things in there too, with what we did with Mark and his mom, and he can't leave town, and all this stuff is.
And he's probably a werewolf.
Oh, and we
Or
hope
something
so.
like
Or
that.
something,
yeah, something like that. Yeah, and that's sort of the Twin Peaks sort of thing. I mean,
But, I think when we came up with Broken, we weren't really modeling it after any of these shows.
no.
There are certain
We
elements.
didn't know what we were doing, so we couldn't have been modeling it.
No, I mean, and we actually tried different levels of direction and different ideas and things before we really figured out how to do it because, before we started recording, I did a lot of research and I couldn't find another radio drama series where it was improvised like this. There are improvised shows, but they aren't ongoing shows with the same characters and the same locations carrying throughout. So we had to really write the playbook ourselves as we went.
One of the interesting things is when I was asked to do this, I made my character into what I was when I had my secondhand store in Greenwood. And I feel that the honesty part of playing George in Broken, all those little things that came out over the years that I had in my antique store. And I started doing antiques back in the 70s. So that's why I developed my character to do that, to the Uziks and learning more about natives of Alaska.
Yeah, and I think I bring in a whole bunch. I was a geologist. I worked as a professional hydrologist for the U.S. Geological Survey for 8 years before I had kids and started being a Brokenite, I guess. But so we have a whole bunch of geology in season 2 because that's what we know. Those are strengths. And Mike, you are like a coffee.
I'm a certified coffee master.
So that Burt starts roasting coffee and starts getting interested in coffee. And there were times when, because Rose is supposed to be like this coffee master in the show, and I don't know. I like milk and sugar. That's all about I know about coffee. So there'd be times when Rose was supposed to say something interesting about coffee, like the Matahuska Kawanuska coffee or whatever it was, and I'd be like, can you just write something down that sounds smart so that Rose can just say it?
Yeah.
And I'd always have to go to Mike Fuller for that because he is actually super knowledgeable about those things. So we're trying to find, with a cast of 12 people, we all have such vast knowledge stores, such deep knowledge about different things. It's been really valuable to make this such a tapestry of a show.
Well, and I think it fills out each character because everybody knows what they're talking about with their character, and they're able to bring, like you said, George, that truth, that honesty that makes this such a compelling piece of work to listen to and to be involved with.
Yes, and it's funny how you bring in different things. So like Carlos was actually, I used to do a Desi Arnaz impression. And so Carlos, to some extent, is my Desi Arnaz impression.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
wonderful.
also there was an old-time radio show called Speed Gibson and the International Secret Police.
Of course there was.
And there was, and of course, in every episode they're talking about the world-famous secret police. And I'm like, they must be really bad at their jobs if they're world-famous secret police. But there's a character in there called Carlos Del Valle who is just full of life and excitement and stuff. And so I just really kind of combined those two to make the Carlos character. And it just kind of came out of me. So
Well, this is tricky, though, because there are scenes in this season and in the second season where Mike Fuller has to talk to himself as different people.
Yes.
Oh, my
and
gosh.
in Broken Burt, in the final scene,
yes.
Burt is confronted by the dagger, and they fight, and they argue, and they're both the same person. And
That
they have
was
different
hard.
voices.
Oh
And
my
that's
gosh.
so hard. Because I've done it in other times too. And I don't know, like if Rose was talking to Margaret Hall or something like that, where it was really hard to talk to yourself in two different voices.
It was hard, but it sounds really good. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm really
It
pleased
does.
with
It does. It
No, I mean, I'm pleased with how well it came out. The hardest one, I think, was there was one scene where Burt was talking to Stewie,
Yes.
and that was a hard one. That was hard because, the accents are so similar that it was hard not to slip from one to the other.
Yeah.
My favorite part of being in the room with you doing that is watching your physicality change because you'll sit in one way in front of the mic as one character, and then when you're talking to yourself, you adjust your entire physical being to be the second character. And so watching you go back and forth between the characters was really fun. And Kari, you do the same thing. So it's a lot of fun to watch. I know nobody gets to see it, but it's kind of a
that would
treat
be-
for those of
that would be
us
fun to see.
that are recording it.
One thing that we didn't realize it at the time, but when we asked Don Taylor to come in, because Don Taylor plays Sheriff Jim, and we asked him, to be a mirror character in London, so he was going to be D.I. James.
Yeah.
In London
Yes.
in 1973.
A New York cop.
Right.
So he was in New York. He was supposed to be a British cop.
Yes, he
right?
was.
Yes.
So poor Don Taylor. God, I love that guy. But we're like, he starts talking, and he's like, "Okay, but here's how it's going. You got to do it this way and this way." And we're like, "Okay, do it again, but pretend you're British, right?" And he was like, "But let me tell you about something here. This is how it's going down." We're like, "Okay." And then at some point, he just kept going, and Mike, as Burt, goes, "Yes, Inspector. That's why we brought you in from New York City."
Yes.
Right? Like we
Yes.
just threw it away. Like, okay,
Brilliant.
brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah, like we're just rolling with it. We're just bringing it. We're improvising it. We're making it up as we go along.
Yeah.
And in this instance, all of a sudden we realize Don's never going to be British.
No,
Let's just
Never.
make him
Never.
Don is so funny, and he's
Yes.
so much fun to
Yes.
play with. But I'm like, did you never hear a British person? Have you never
Accents
seen
are
anyone? Have you
hard.
never watched Masterpiece Theater? I mean,
Accents are
But
very
it's when
hard.
accents in front of the microphone, because I, as we all now know, cannot be Australian in front
I
of a
know.
microphone. It's something, there's a block in my brain. It is physically impossible for me to do an Australian accent. If I'm at home, I could do Australian till the cows come home, till the dingoes come
Yeah.
home. But in this studio, something is not right. I can't do it. So I think that was what it was with Don, because all of a sudden the microphone turned on and he got so nervous he couldn't make
because
the
I
New
remember
York.
him warming up
Yeah,
and doing
he
a
was totally
really
beautifully
good.
London. Yeah.
Yeah.
well,
It
I
was
think
funny.
it's a psychological thing
Yes,
where
it
you
is.
don't like nobody likes to be wrong. Like nobody wants to do it badly.
Right.
And I think, subconsciously you think, I suck at this. I can't do this. And it's like what I've learned is, and why I think you just commit fully.
Yeah.
You can't worry about doing it wrong. You've just got to do it full bore.
Well, I think Sally in this one, Sally's accent isn't British. I think she's sort of Irish.
She's Irish, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, because there were 6 of us in a room trying to do 10 different characters, as is usually the case,
Right.
we have to pull out accents
Yes.
as a big part of our toolkit because the listener can't see. We can't put on a wig and be somebody
Right.
else. Margaret Hall has to be very different than Rose, has to be very different than Julie, the cruise director, by accents, by voice. So,
Do a little bit of Becky. I love Becky.
no, you can't make me do it. Don't make me do it. It hurts. Don't do it. My
Do
kids,
Margaret Hall.
my kids make me do Becky, and
Margaret
I'm like,
Hall.
no, I don't
Yeah,
want
I
to
want to
do
do Margaret Hall.
Oh, come on, Kari.
I don't even know. Margaret Hall I love because she's so old and so crusty and just so.
And she's my sister.
And your cousin. No,
Her
she's your cousin. That came out of nowhere one day
I
too.
know,
That was
it was
hysterical. But that's the thing. Like I'm curious, and I would be very open to having conversations with people about. There's a lot of conversations going on about how if you're not from the South, you shouldn't play someone from the South.
Right.
If you're not gay, you shouldn't play someone who's gay. If you're not disabled, you shouldn't play someone who's disabled, whatever. And we had to, because we have such a small little band of voice actors, Carlos Del Valle,
Yes.
Mike is not actually from Latin America. I don't know. I've always been curious, and I'd be very interested to have conversations with people who are listening about, is that okay? I mean, I'm this white girl from Wisconsin, so should I not play Rose from California? Should I not play Margaret Hall, who's 97? I don't know. It was something we've just had to sort of work with, and we're hoping to do it with honesty and with love, and hoping that comes across.
I think it does.
Yeah,
I mean, I thought about that with Carlos, where I tried to be very respectful and not play to stereotypes. I consciously tried to avoid that and be as respectful with Carlos as I possibly could.
We're hoping, like I said, to be respectful. We're not ever making fun of anyone because, we're not making fun of Margaret Hall because she's
Was it
an
the
old
eye?
It's just a
lady from the
descriptor.
Marines.
It's one of those that my impression was always these are descriptors of people.
We purposely wanted to make
right.
Broken
Very
a
inclusive.
diverse and inclusive place.
Yeah.
And to do that, we had to have a lot of different characters from a lot of different places,
And-
both just because we needed voices to sound different, so you could tell who was speaking and that there was a different speaker, because you're listening, not watching, but also because we wanted it to be a
Right.
microcosm of the whole country. We wanted to have
I would
a lot
say
of different
even
people
the
there.
whole world because
Yeah,
we've
yeah.
got we've got people from Russia,
Ukraine.
Yes,
Ukraine.
Ukraine.
Exactly, Ukraine.
From the
Season
country.
2
From
Ukraine.
right.
Ukraine.
If we did have diverse people, and we do in our cast, we have diverse people.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm quite proud of. We're 50% female. We have a bunch of different ethnicities and religions, and people are from all over the country, and it's something I think we can be proud of. It's just something that today in our society we always have to be conscious of, and we try to be conscious. We had no idea when we started season 1 where season 1 was going to go.
Right.
Right.
And we had a general outline of what we thought the story would be. But because we're all making it up, Mike Fuller and I sort of try to guide it and quote unquote direct it. But the cast is making stuff up constantly.
Yeah.
And so we're holding really lightly this idea that we have in our hands about where we think this episode's going to go, because we've seen that when we try to hold too tightly, it isn't very good. You know? And when we let them just do it, when we let the cast just go, they go in crazy places we could never have imagined. And that's where the brilliance happens. And that's where these ideas for the next episode, and further down the season really evolve.
And even further, because you and I are in it,
yeah.
it's
Yes.
even stranger to try to direct it. With the very first show, the documentary that we did, at the end when Johnny 99, played by the brilliant Michael Crowley, is doing a call-in show, I call in as the Dagger.
And we didn't know you were going to do that.
No,
Yeah.
no, I
Nobody
didn't,
knew.
nor did I. I
Right.
just, it was my turn to come up and say something. I go, "Hello, Johnny.
Do you know who this
Do you know who this is? It's the Dagger." and none of us knew what the Dagger was.
That
or
was the first day of recording. We're like, okay, I guess what's
Yep.
this now?
Yeah, we didn't know who the Dagger was. The Dagger was going to be the main focus of the whole first season, that it was going to culminate with with the confrontation with him.
And then we didn't hear anything about the dagger for a few episodes.
Yeah.
And then out of the blue, it sort of came back that Burt knew about the dagger and that it sort of grew from there. It was definitely one of those inspired moments where we're like, what is he doing?
Oh, and another one was when Burt said, look for incidents of the number 5.
Right.
And I didn't know what that meant when I said it. It just came out of my mouth.
You know what? It's taken us 2 seasons to come up with something it might mean, too.
Exactly.
Because that's the thing. When you say something like that, as a writer, I'm like, how are we going to make that make sense somewhere, somehow, you know?
Yeah.
And so the last couple episodes of each of the seasons has been like Mike and I frantically emailing each other back and forth going, well, remember you said something about 5? Somehow that has to become a thing now. Like,
yeah,
what
we brought it up enough, it has to be answered.
Right.
What is the point of number 5? And Mike goes, I don't know. I just said it. I'm like, okay, we got to figure out what it means now.
The brilliant part of this whole show is that with a little bit of a premise, all these talented actors turn around and go from that. One little word can lead a whole episode, you know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're very fortunate to have Kari and Mike let us run with it.
And you run so
Yeah.
well. It's
Oh,
so
yeah,
cool to watch.
yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, and the way that you all edit and put the effects in, and it, it's just, it's been such a pleasure and such an honor to be a part of this.
It really is fun to get
So-
together.
I think it should be on HBO, personally.
It could at least be a Netflix show,
Yeah,
right?
with us starring in it, of course.
Of course.
As all the different characters.
Yes.
Like, wouldn't
Oh,
you like to
yeah.
see Lisa Kaufman as Louise
Oh,
and
yes.
Kitty?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
She, like, Lisa Kaufman and Charney Rose Andrea are Lisa. I mean, Lisa plays Louise and Kitty, and Charney plays Denise. And they just moved to Los Angeles, and they're working down there at the Groundlings, and they're doing some acting, and they're starting sort of just, like, blossoming in their beginnings of their acting careers.
Yeah,
And you
they're
guys
brilliant.
watch Lisa and Charney, because they're going to do great.
talented.
Oh,
Very
and
talented.
any time that Louise and Rose are in the same room,
I love
Yes.
how much
Oh.
they hate
Yes.
each other.
oh, I love the favorite one. The last line between them was, Louise says to Rose, "Enjoy dying alone."
In her Frenchy French accent.
yeah.
And Lisa Kaufman, she speaks fluent French, and she spent a lot of time in France and stuff, so it's easy for her to do that accent. But yeah, I don't even remember why she hates Rose, or when that developed. I think from the very beginning, Louise hated Rose because
Yeah.
she was a snooty produce lady. Like that's a thing. Like, you are a produce lady. Why
Yeah.
would I not hate you? You
Yeah.
know? And I'm like, what? But yeah, with the two of them together, and Lisa's much quicker than I am too, so she'll say stuff. I'm just not used to people saying such mean things to me. I guess she'll say stuff, and I'm like, Rose is definitely more of a, 12:30 at night laying in her bed. Aha! Well, this is what I should have said. But Lisa
Although-
comes
Oh,
up
we
with it
all do
quick.
that.
Although
We
I
all-
loved in season 2 where they were really going at it, and Mark was trying to break them up, and they were like, "Shut up, Mark!
Shut up, Mark. Back off. We're having a
Yeah,
fight
they
here.
they both go, "Shut up, Mark!"
Oh, it's fun. It's fun being in a
Yeah.
scene with Lisa
Yes.
Kaufman. That's
Yes,
for
it
sure.
is.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mike Fuller, for talking with us today about
Thanks.
Broken Burt. A sad, sad episode, but so important to see sort of Burt Hollowell's backstory, and Taylor Edwards and George Birch Wertz, and I'm Kari Aguila, and we hope you keep listening to Broken Alaska.